Los Angeles, I'm and most Hollywood nights. She goes to California, oh, California.
What you say about Los Angeles?
LA got the people saying,
You're listening to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. It's time for another episode of Corner of the Galaxy from the Box, the show that gets you behind the scenes of the LA Galaxy and into the minds of soccer reporters and MLS experts. Your hosts for the day are Corner of the Galaxy's Josh Guesman and LA Times soccer reporter Kevin Baxter. Let's start the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. Coming to you on Monday, November 29th. Just 2 days left in November. Getting ready to switch on over to December. LA Galaxy have a busy schedule of events. MLS has a busy schedule of events coming up here. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the roster decisions that were finally made. Jonathan dos Santos, his departure. Dennis Declosa, his departure. Lots of things happened over that Thanksgiving break. We're going to round it all back up for you and tell you where you're at. Fill in some other things, international stuff, all sorts of fun things like that. So, a good show. I imagine there's a lot of information. Sorry about that. It's just the way some of the things happen, and it's we're going to go deep into the rosters and all that fun stuff as well. So, in order to help me do that, he is back. He is not here in the United States, but we'll give him a chance to explain his current whereabouts. I feel like we're playing a game of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. It's Mr. Kevin Baxter. Kev, how's it going?
Hola, Joshua. Estoy aquí en México, en el Distrito Federal de Mexico.
Oh,
and by the way, I want to tell you that I like the Comedy Store thing with the bricks.
Yes.
But I liked it better when it said what a non-playoff edition.
Whenever it was no playoffs? No playoffs.
By the way, I like the pajamas. That's a nice touch.
I don't know why you are harassing me about my holiday garb already. This is a shirt I wore to work today. Thank you. It's a polo. It works. And I would also like to point out that my studio in the back, we have gone from the normal podcast blue that is normally in the background, which is very much a galaxy color, to what I like to call wintry mix. And if you're from a cold place, or if you've been associated with any cold places, you know wintry mix is this thing that's somewhere between snow and rain, and it sounds delightful, but it's really a second level of hell, which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
Well, you have the candle back there. And by the way, my wife says when I have my glasses on, I look like Mr. Fredrickson from Up.
This is true. Actually, that is the most accurate thing ever.
It's a talking dog.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. You do that. You're in Mexico. What are you doing in Mexico?
I'm in Mexico. I don't know if this is a secret. Maybe I'm letting the cat out of the bag. But tomorrow, the Mexican Football Federation will announce a rebranding. They're going to have a new logo, new look. Today they announced. We went to the training center today. Which is amazing. One of the things that I had a conversation with Chris Klein over the weekend, not to name drop, and he was telling me when I go to the training center here, look around because the U.S. does not have anything like this. So we went to the Mexican training center. There's, I think, 3 pitches. There's a sand pitch for the beach volleyball team. It's pretty cool.
That's cool.
There's 2 hotels so that like a youth team can be there and a senior national team can be there. And they're in a hotel. It's like a real hotel. There's a cafeteria where they can go. There's the most amazing gymnasium that I've ever seen. They have 2 half pitches, where you can go, goalies can go, goalkeepers can go train. Today, the Canadian national women's team was there, the Mexican women's team, and then the Canadian national women's team was there. So anyway, the point is we're here for the rebranding of the Mexican National Federation. Tomorrow, before the rebranding ceremony, we're going to go to Toluca, which is where a lot of the youth national teams train. Now, one of the things I did, I had a one-on-one conversation with Tata Martino, the coach of the Mexican national team today. I also talked to Jan de la Huiza, who is the president of the Mexican Federation. I thought this was news. I found out it's not. Tata Martino told me that Efrain Alvarez and Julian Araujo would be called into camp ahead of next month's friendly with Chile, which will be played in Austin, Texas. and then there were pictures that came out of Efrain and Julian in training today. So not a big news. I did not see them at the training center. They may be at Toluca. They may be somewhere else.
They were running from you. That was
Yeah,
they saw you coming and they went out the back door. Yeah.
But I will say we did see the Canadian national team train, and I hope this is not the first team for Canada's women because they were terrible. They were working on shots on goal, and it was like 35-yard field goals. It was not even close. It was like Walker Zimmerman's penalty kick.
Oh, ouch! Ooh, a Nashville joke right in there. Didn't get one in the net there. Yeah, I was going to say if you had not been paying attention to MLS, wacky things are happening in the playoffs. A team that cheated is now probably the favorite in the Western Conference in order to get there. So RSL storming through people. Portland is there as well. So that game coming up. New England was supposed to be playing tomorrow night. That's right, tomorrow night they're playing their first game. I think Philadelphia is awaiting the winner of that, and Philadelphia just took out Nashville.
Now, let's talk about New England for just a second. Bruce Arena today won his 4th MLS Coach of the Year award. That's a record. No one's won more than 4. They won the Supporters Shield this year. They finished first in the Eastern Conference, set a record, MLS best regular season record. They've played one game since October 27th.
Yes.
They played a game every 6 days during the regular season. Then they go, I think it's 33 days without playing a game. They're going to play Tuesday. There's 5 teams in the playoffs that have already played twice. Mm-hmm. New England hasn't played at all. That's supposed to be their reward for winning the conference. I just and they're going to play a New York City FC team, which is pretty tough. And then if they get past that, they have to go play Philadelphia, which, by the way, is better for New England because Bruce Arena has never beaten Nashville since he came to since he came to New England. It's the only Eastern Conference team he hasn't beaten. Philadelphia this year, they won 2 and tied and drew once. They haven't lost to Philadelphia. Better matchup for New England. But the point is, how do you reward a team by giving them 33 days off? And if they win, they have 4 days between games. They have to play the second game within 4 days. That is just crazy.
And Philadelphia has already played. They already played. What did they play last night or the night before? And now they're more rested. I mean, it's this weird thing that happens in MLS, and especially this. They tried to massage this schedule, and to me, it's lost momentum. We talked about the momentum. It's that international break every single time, whether it's in the playoffs or whether it's in between the regular season and the playoffs, Kevin. There's something that is lost in that. Maybe it's the fact that the LA Galaxy don't seem to ever be getting ready to play those games, at least not in recent memory here, outside of 2019. There's no playoff game. Maybe that's why it loses momentum for me, who likes to shut things down for a little bit.
Next year, they won't have that international break, so it'll be smoother. But in the case of this year, I think in retrospect, when you look back, New England and the West, Colorado, which lost their first playoff game, they played 5 days ago. I think those teams would want to play a first-round game. And the reason why is if they're a superior team, if they're the best team in the conference, let them play the 8th seed, send 8 teams along. Let them play that team. Let them play a game instead of just sitting around waiting. The idea is you're rewarded for that. No, you're not rewarded for that. And Brian Strauss of Sports Illustrated had a really interesting stat. I didn't believe it, so I went and looked it up, and it's true. Since 2010, so the last 11 years, the teams that have won the conference standings in the regular season, which in this case this year was Colorado and New England.
Right.
Only 2 teams of those 22 have gone on to MLS Cup.
LA Galaxy was one of them in 2011. I
right.
remember that.
And the other one was Toronto when they won Supporters Shield and then MLS Cup in 2017.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's extremely difficult to do as a whole deal. I have a question. So Bruce Arena named MLS Coach of the Year. He was going up against some good competition.
Robin Fraser was second.
Yeah, Robin Fraser was second, and there were a lot of good reasons why you could have voted for Robin Fraser. Understood. Again, I didn't get a vote, so I don't have a problem with this. The whole deal. But so Bruce wins though, and Bruce wins the Siggy Schmidt Coach of the Year award. Do you think Bruce is sort of like? Does that feel a little weird to Bruce? It feels weird to me whenever you sort of put it out there.
Well, the Dominion voting machines that were used for that, I think, there's election fraud all over the place. Hugo Chavez was involved somehow. I don't know. But, when obviously Bruce is not going to say anything.
Of course not.
The least bit, shady about Ziggy now. But when Ziggy was still around and when the Galaxy in Seattle had those, playoff battles every year, he told me that Ziggy and he go back into their college days. They faced off a lot. And I never got the feeling that Bruce necessarily was warmed up to Ziggy the way he did to Bob Bradley. And Ziggy pulled some stuff. I remember going to a playoff game in Seattle one year, and The Sounders trained match day -1. They trained at their complex. The field was fine. Galaxy went to train at what was then CenturyLink Field, covered with snow. They hadn't bothered to clear the snow off. Little gamesmanship that Ziggy tried. And Bruce would mention that, and I think they totally respected each other. I think Bruce still has total respect for Ziggy, but they weren't best friends at all. The interesting thing is the Galaxy connection to both of them, though.
Right. No, it is. It just feels a little, it's just weird. I had a bunch of conversations with people off the time. By the way, Cameron was asking if you vote for end of the season awards, and you have a vote, but you don't vote, correct?
I have a vote, and I don't vote because I have reason to believe that MLS sometimes has the outcome decided ahead of time.
Yeah, that's your opinion. I would just like to point that out.
That's my opinion. My opinion
Yes.
only. So for the major awards, which are pretty simple, I don't vote because of that. Then the other ones, a lot of times they want you to pick the best 11. I really don't know who the best central midfielder in MLS is, and some guys have contract clauses for that. For some guys, it's a big deal. I don't want to just go vote for a Seattle Sounder guy or somebody from Houston that I've seen when maybe the best player plays for Inter Miami. So,
yeah, and we don't get to see, again, there are 27, now 28 teams coming into Major League Soccer. 28 teams. That is 14 games that you have to watch basically every weekend. That's a lot, Kevin, and I can't watch all those games, and you can't watch all those games, and I can watch some highlights here and there. I can do that, but it's really difficult to determine who the best is overall. So very interesting stuff. Glad we got to talk about it. I'm glad we touched on some of that stuff. Let's get to some of the news, though, that happened over the break. The first thing that we have been talking about here for 4 or 5 months on the program, talking about Dennis Declosa, whether or not he was going to come back, whether or not the Galaxy were going to exercise his option, a whole bunch of other things that were sort of playing into this. And we have led you through this road and through the negotiations and through everything that we had learned about what was going on with that club all the way through until this weekend when, basically on... let's see, I'm trying to go back and sort of figure out. I think on Friday morning, I had a discussion with somebody and sort of knew that Dennis was gone and that there were being announcements.
What's funny is I reached out to Dennis and said, "So are you going to the Netherlands?" And he goes, "I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. By the way, I'm in the Netherlands."
Yeah. It was, it is funny. And I've had some conversations with him since and before a little bit too, and just it was always interesting just sort of getting it. But just following through all this stuff, I mean, the announcement comes out and says, Dennis Declosa is leaving the LA Galaxy. He's going back to the Netherlands to be, for his next challenge, and he was excited to do it and the whole deal. And all of the press release sort of sits here and says, Dennis left because he really wanted to go back to the Netherlands. And I'm sure some of that is true. Right? Absolutely, Kevin. Some of that is true. But I think that we would be ignoring things, and we had talked about this many, many times throughout the course of this sort of process taking place. We would be ignoring the fact that Dennis Declosa was under contract for the next season. He was under contract for 2022 because the LA Galaxy exercised his option on October 15th. And at least what I'm told is at the last possible day to exercise the contract, it was exercised.
Within hours of the option expiring.
Right. And so basically the whole deal. Now, we also know that Dennis's name was already popping up in places. There was some Houston talk. Remember Cincinnati at one point early on as well, although I don't think that was ever a real thing. But Dennis's name was already popping up about being general manager of some clubs in Major League Soccer and some other places, possibly in Mexico. And then, eventually it comes down into the Netherlands as well. But we know before the option was even exercised that there were people interested in Dennis, and Dennis, because he didn't know what his future was, at least from our understanding, is that he was out there looking for stuff too, because he's a guy who likes to work, Kevin. He's not a guy who's going to be sitting around for a year whenever, if something goes, if the Galaxy decided not to exercise the option, so that he was going to look for places as well. Yeah.
I got the sense from him that he was a little bit hurt by the fact the Galaxy were leaving the option open. Like, are you guys going to pick it up? I need to know what's my future, what's going to happen. And I think Dennis's feeling was, look, if you want me, it's obvious, exercise the option. By waiting to the last minute, I think he kind of, this is my impression from reading between the lines, numerous conversations with Dennis. He never said this, but my feeling was he felt a little bit insulted. Like, if you want me, bring me back. If you don't want me, let me go. And this sort of playing around, he thought he deserved better than that.
Yeah, And if we go back and look at the history now of the GMs, right, or the people who were in charge of making decisions for all this stuff, you got Pete Vagenas after Bruce Arena left, right? Pete Vagenas was put in charge. Vagenas was eventually demoted, and then released, right? Remember there was. Do we tell? So let's go way back to Pete Vagenas. Kevin, do you remember when we did a podcast that didn't make the air about Pete Vagenas?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I'll tell the story a little bit. This is behind the scenes, and I won't get into the super details. But you and I were tipped off to something that was going to happen, right? And we were like, Pete Vagenas looks like he's no longer going to be with the club, the whole deal. So we did a podcast, and we said we'll hold it until the next day to make sure that we're right. And this has happened a couple of times throughout the years. If you ever see us holding a podcast like, oh, well, it'll be out in the morning or something like that, it's usually because we're waiting to be right. And most of the 99% of the time we're right. This was one time when we were incorrect, though, because we thought that Vagenas was departing the LA Galaxy. And in fact, he had been demoted but stayed with the club. Was that what you remember as well?
Yeah. And then Ziggy took over as general manager after Pete.
So it went to Pete, and then it went to Siggy, and Siggy was in charge as like the GM and the head coach and everything there, right? And he had Kurt Schmidt with him as well. There was another large push whenever Kurt Anolfo was there, where there was a push to really sort of solidify the scouting and do all that stuff. And then there was another big push under Siggy Schmidt as GM with Kurt Schmidt there to solidify the scouting and to advance some of their analytics and their search and their net and everything like that. And then Siggy Schmidt is fired, although again, that was a mutually decided to part ways. So that happened, right? So then you have Dennis Declosa comes in whenever you get the next GM. So Dennis Declosa. So you've had now 3 GMs that have been in charge of this route throughout these whole things, and not one of them, I believe, has really left on good terms with the LA Galaxy, and that includes Dennis Declosa here. I think he'll say nice things, and he certainly did, and he thanked everybody, and he has told me, and he told us in the summertime, Kevin, that he had unfinished to do with the LA Galaxy, and he wanted to stay, and he wanted to be there. He told us at our live show. And then now he leaves, and talking with him, he tells me there was still unfinished business.
Well, it's one of the iconic. It's a original franchise in MLS. The Galaxy, one of the iconic. They've won more MLS titles than anyone. They have more wins than anybody. But it's in turmoil right now. If you go back to Bruce, since Bruce left, there's been 3 general managers and 5 coaches, and they've made 1 playoff appearance.
Yep.
Now it's a record streak. Now I think it's 7 years since they made an MLS Cup final. That's the longest in Galaxy history by a lot. And when you talk about the general manager position, and I've spoken to all of the former general managers, so I'm not going to name any of them. I'll just tell you a couple stories. One general manager, well, I guess if I give you the name of the player, you'll know who it is. But one general manager told me when he came in, they needed to sign a defender. One defender had left. They needed to sign another defender. It was midseason. They had to do it immediately. And this general manager coach, which one it was, went to the front office and said, "Where's the list of players we've been scouting? We need a backup for a defender. Who do we got? Oh, we don't have that list." And this guy told me every team has these lists. It's just general thing that you do. It's what executives do. No list. Galaxy weren't prepared. And then I've heard other stories about there is no place where the buck stops. If someone over here in the front office says we should sign this guy, and someone over here says no, we can't afford it, we should sign that guy, there's no one in the middle to referee that argument, and it never gets decided. And so what happens is the Galaxy pass up opportunities. And I've heard from general managers that the Galaxy have so much potential and so many resources, and they're just not taking advantage of these great resources and opportunities that they have.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm reading through the chat room here as well, and Eric joins us in the chat room and says, "Not the Hammer, by the way. It's a different Eric. It's a different Eric." He says, "Is this a big loss for the Galaxy?" Talking about Dennis Declosa, and he says fans at Feyenoord are anticipating him to do big things in Rotterdam and bring about a cultural shift to the organization. Eric's last name leads me to believe he possibly could be Dutch. And is joining us in there to find out about some Dennis Declosa. Listen, I think that there are a lot of people, that are confused about what a general manager does and don't seem to understand what Dennis's job was. However,
it's different from team to team. You do have to say it's different from team to team.
Yeah, and I agree. We can talk about that a little bit because I think we're going to get to who's making the decisions, and I think it's important to sort of break that down. But if you're looking at what directly Dennis Declosa did, and my big takeaways, and certainly from talking to him and talking to people around the club, is looking at the academy system, bringing in Juan Carlos Ortega, which Kevin, you and I were talking about beforehand, who had left and probably signaled a little bit of a change from the LA Galaxy organization, that perhaps something not all was right with Dennis Declosa and not all was right with the way the organization was being, they thought was being led by Dennis. But bringing in Juan Carlos Ortega to be the technical director of the academy system and establishing an academy system, establishing an expectation, Kevin, for young players, an expectation for young players, what was expected of them and how they could get to the first team. And if you look at what Dennis did just in that realm, remember the LA Galaxy were known for having boatloads of talent down in the academy system, Kevin, and converting none of those to contracts and letting all those players go for free. And we saw that over and over again. And Dennis really, sort of went in there and put his foot down on that stuff and said, this is how we're going to do it. And it used to be, hey, if you're in the LA Galaxy Academy system, you can just go to Europe and the LA Galaxy don't get anything for you. And you'll have, a chance, at least. It's going to be a small chance, but a chance to play over in Europe. And Dennis said, you shouldn't be going to Europe unless you're getting first team minutes. Your priority isn't to get to Europe to bypass the LA Galaxy. It's to go through the LA Galaxy to get to Europe. Look at Julian Araujo, look at Efrain Alvarez. You look at all the homegrown players that were sort of signed under Dennis, and the trust that he was able to build with those players, Kevin, is one of the most important things because it was not there. And I think the Galaxy were neglecting, their academy system to a large part before Dennis got there. So if you're looking for the biggest thing that Dennis did, and his impact on the organization, it was to stabilize, I think, an academy system that was bleeding players. And now I think has a pretty reasonable pipeline from the academy through LA Galaxy 2 and into LA Galaxy to say, if you want to go to Europe, then your job is to make a splash here through the first team, and then we'll get to you to Europe. And I think that's the biggest thing.
Well, here's the interesting thing with Dennis. When he came in, remember, Guillermo then came in right after him. Guillermo played in MLS, but really didn't know how MLS worked from a contract situation, from that kind of stuff. Dennis had executive experience with Chivas USA. He had executive experience with in Mexico. He knew how to get contracts done. He knew how to do that stuff, and he knew how to scout players and find players through what he did with the Mexican national team. So Guillermo comes in, doesn't know MLS. Dennis comes in. They're a team. Dennis stabilizes the youth system, as you said. He does a lot of that backfilling. He helps Guillermo sign players, find players to sign, all that kind of stuff. Dennis and Guillermo were kind of was the left hand and the right hand. Then Greg Vanney comes in. Greg Vanney has been a successful coach and a technical director, which when we talk about the splitting the hairs between what a general manager does and what, say, a technical director or a sporting director does, we'll talk about that in a minute. But Greg had all that experience. He knew how he wanted to build his team. He didn't need somebody telling him where to go scout. What he needed is someone to sign contracts and make the money work. That's not what Dennis wanted to do. The thing with Dennis is to answer the question from Eric, is it a loss? Yes and no. It's a loss because Dennis had a lot of ability, a lot of talent. He's a very, he could have been a very useful part in this, but Greg didn't want that. Greg wanted to make the decisions himself.
That's your assumption, though. That is your
assumption.
assumption.
Yeah. But and so if Greg is going to make those decisions, and Dennis all of a sudden isn't a general manager, he's an executive assistant or whatever you want to call it. He's not going to get the salary that he had. But I guess my point was, when you look at the academy director leaving, going back to Mexico, you look at the team now as Greg Vanney's. Did Dennis leave a legacy? After 3 years, I think he's leaving, and it's almost as if he wasn't here.
I disagree. I mean, and by the way, you'll be feeling that legacy for years to come because of the academy system and where it was sort of put in place.
But the director's gone. It is going to continue in that direction that Dennis said.
I mean, it doesn't matter because you already have, 10 players that are sort of already edging towards first team playability, and those 10 players could be with the club for the next 10 years and 12 years. I mean, it would be really cynical to say that Dennis leaves and you don't know he was here. Looking at Julian Araujo's contract and the ability to keep Julian Araujo for a little bit of time, or also to sell him for a tremendous amount of money, the relationship that was there, that was built. Same with Efrain Alvarez. You go down to, Jalen Neal and Furkranis and, other guys now that are sort of bubbling up to this senior team level, and those have Dennis's fingerprints on it. and sort of guiding
as
that.
well. And you say Chicharito, that's a Dennis guy. Dennis knew Chicharito from the time he was a youth player at Chivas. Chicharito probably doesn't come without Dennis, but then Dennis also signed Giancarlo Gonzalez, who's still going to cost the Galaxy another $1 million this next season. So,
but we were also talking about, and you said that technically speaking, and we talked about this specifically, is that as the GM and sort of what Genesis' job was to do would certainly be to recommend players, but more than likely it was the coach saying, we need this guy, we need a defender, go out and get this defender. I will continue to argue. There are some things I would always argue. One is Giancarlo Gonzalez was a good buy, right? Because of what he did, because of his knowledge of Major League Soccer, where he went, and when he came back, nobody expected him to be. Sometimes guys just fall off, and there's nothing you can do about it. There was no indications, certainly not from his time playing, I think, in Italy, that he was going to be as poor as he was whenever he came back. It's one of those things. It happens. I mean, Shelvik, quite honestly, was a much better defender than what he showed with the LA Galaxy. Now, that ends up being a bad contract, but again, sometimes you sign the guys for all the right reasons, and then things go sideways and it doesn't work out, right? So, I mean,
I want to make it clear, I'm not anti-Dennis. I'm very pro-Dennis. I'm just saying that it just seems as if whatever Dennis constructed, the Galaxy seemed to just saying, oh, we don't need that anymore.
But if you, the big deal for me, and certainly,
You're right about the players, by the way. You're right about the players. You're absolutely right. That's something I hadn't thought about. He did, Ephraim will be here and Julian will be here longer because of Dennis, and then some of these other young players they signed. You're right about those guys.
So it was I'm trying to, whenever you look at what made Dennis, I think, a better GM than some of the things that we've seen, is just his openness, his willing to explain, his willingness to answer questions, to interact with fans, all that stuff. But it was also the scouting. Do you know like how often I would like send him a message or something? He's like, oh, I'm at this U12 game and I'm watching these kids play right now and I'm scouting these guys. And I was like, oh, I'm at this, USL game because I'm doing this, and I'm over here. Oh, I'm at this America versus Pachuca game because I'm scouting the players. The dude was always scouting. He was always looking at guys. He was always trying to just keep in mind who was around, who was playing well. And it was just, it was constant, Kevin. It was every time you would talk to him. So it was interesting. I'll say this. He didn't pretend to be on his phone whenever he would see the press. That's for sure. Which I thought was a huge bonus for all of us. So, I mean, certainly his relationship with the media was important, and it's probably one of the reasons that I am probably more pro-Dennis than maybe some other people are. That being said, I got told I was full of it many times by the man, and so that always helps too, whenever you realize that he's not going to suffer fools and the whole deal. So the big question now, though, is who's in charge, and we don't have an answer, but we think we think we can assume what that answer is, right?
We kind of do. As I mentioned earlier, I had a conversation with Chris Klein this weekend, and he told me that he said clearly that Greg Vanney is in charge of player personnel decisions. That doesn't mean he doesn't take input from other people, but he's the final say. I want this guy. I don't want that guy. So when we talk a little bit about does the buck stop here? The buck stops now with Greg Vanney. He is the ultimate decision maker. Now, Chris said that they are reorganizing the front office. They will make an announcement on that shortly. My guess is they bring in somebody maybe with a general manager title, maybe not. Because
is that going to be like a technical director? Is that what we're going to end up?
Greg is going to be the technical director, and the way I think the Galaxy want to explain that is Greg is the coach, Greg is the technical director. That gives him the umbrella of anybody that steps on the field. Greg is in charge of.
But do you think that also includes academy guys as well? So Greg is now in charge of that whole thing. Okay.
No, I don't think it includes. Although he does have an academy background. Remember his job at Real Salt Lake, and then in Toronto was the academy. So he does have that experience. I just think that's too big a portfolio. So I do think they're going to bring in somebody to help him with contracts and those kind of things. MLS contracts, the whole system is extremely complex. We talked before the show, like we have coming up in December. There's the re-entry draft stage 1. There's the re-entry draft stage 2. There's the expansion draft. There's the super draft. There's free agency. There's contract options. Bruce Arena could do that because he grew up. He came along with all of those changes. He knew everything. There's just been too many complex things added to the system now. So I do think someone will come in that will be in sort of an executive to handle the contracts and make sure the money works. The academy is an interesting one, though, too, because do they hire 2 people? Do they hire academy director? Does one person do both? They do need someone to oversee that academy because Dennis did stock it with some good players, and it's going to wither on the vine if they don't get someone to take care of it. We're going to see, again, guys like Yuli Yanez heading off to Europe for free because no one's paying attention to him.
Yeah. By the way, if you didn't hear my hour-long talk with Dennis Declosa about academy and developmental players and sort of how that works and what his views are, go back and listen to that podcast. I think it was one of my more interesting talks that I've ever had with somebody, just being open about how they saw things and how they thought things should progress. And I really think that should be a template for how the LA Galaxy sort of do stuff.
By the way, before you get away from that, that was a great conversation. And I want to go back to that saying, look at where we've come since 2016. We've talked about the number of general managers, the number of coaches. Bruce leaves in 2016. The team decides we're going all in on the academy. Everyone from the academy, boom, you're on the first team now. Let's see what happens. Now we're in a situation where then they follow that up by bringing in Dennis, a guy whose whole career has been built on youth development. He's going to put this academy together. He signs players. He gets players onto the first team. And what do? They let them go. This, again, kind of gets back to the dysfunction of the Galaxy. In 2017, we're all in the academy. Then we hire Pete Vainus as GM. He was the academy director. We bring in Dennis, an academy guy who stocks the team. It's like a fishery. It's stocked with talent. And then we let him go. And now all of a sudden, what happened to the academy? I thought in 2017, the academy was everything. Now we're letting the academy director go. And then the guy that hired him, we let him go too.
It's interesting. Let's talk about Jonathan dos Santos, because I want to sort of switch about that. This is what widely expected departure. If you have been following the show for any period of time in the last year,
in general,
in the last year, widely expected, was not a surprise. And the people who were surprised today, and I saw them on social media, I was like, "Did you hit your head on something? Were you in a coma for a year? Are you Rip Van Winkle? Is that what's going on?"
Have you seen the game in the last 2 seasons?
Yeah. So, it's super interesting. His departure, Jonathan dos Santos' departure, ends 7.5 years of a Dos Santos being on an LA Galaxy roster. Think about that for a second. Imagine how long 7.5 years is. Breathe it in. All right. Basically, the middle of 2015, Giovanni Dos Santos signed for the LA Galaxy, still under Bruce's tenure, right? And then Jonathan Dos Santos eventually joins in 2017. This was under Kurt Onalfo. If I remember correctly.
No, it wasn't under Kurt Onalfo. It was the day Ziggy got hired. It was the exact same day or the day after.
It was it was right, but we already knew he was coming in, right? Remember that was,
but it hadn't been announced yet.
Right, and I think it was we better do something this summer, so let's sign this guy. And that was, if I remember, a conversation that we had a long time ago, Kevin, maybe sometime in 2018.
You said how long is 7.5 years? It's more than a quarter of of MLS's existence. Yes. There's been a Dos Santos on the Galaxy.
Which is crazy. I mean, it's such a. By the way, I would like to point out 7.5 years with the Dos Santos. Only one trophy was acquired during that 7.5 years, Kevin. Which one trophy was it?
Wow. Participation trophy?
You're overthinking it. You're already overthinking it. It lived in my office for a whole year.
Oh, the wooden spoon.
The wooden spoon. I mean, and that's a cruel thing to sort of say whenever you lay it down, but that's also reality,
it's
right?
7.5. It's a prize. By the way, before we get totally away from Dennis, you're speaking of the Dos Santos. One thing that Dennis did do is, and this was thought to be impossible. Remember, he was able to get Gio out of his DP contract to sign Zlatan before the 2018 season. And remember, we all talked about how that would never happen. So he knows his way around the contracts.
Oh my, he does. He did. So yeah, but Jonathan Dos Santos leaves. John, do you have in your mind? Can something stick out? The best of Jonathan Dos Santos? Is there something that you sort of say, this is what I think of whenever I think of Jonathan Dos Santos?
Well, it's not anything on the field. It's all off the field. He was a great guy to deal with. He was always smiling, always smiling. I never saw him down, no matter what. He was always smiling, always laughing. Everything was funny to him. He loved LA. He has a house in the Hollywood Hills, not far from Carlos Vela's house. He took English on his own. I don't know if the team helped him pay for that, but he got a tutor, worked on English on his own. That was his idea. He talked about wanting to retire here, wanting to stay here. He said he didn't want to get U.S. citizenship, but he did want to stay here after his career was over. He hoped that it would end with the Galaxy. Now, I don't think it will. He's only 31. I think he'll probably wind up in Liga MX. But he, and at the end of his career, he started to get good enough in English where the last interview I did with him was in English. But he knew that I spoke Spanish. So up until then, we either did it all in Spanish or we did it in Spanglish, where he would allow me to ask the questions in English, and then he would respond in Spanish. Yeah. And that was kind of cool because it was like, look, I know you speak Spanish, but you're better language than English. I understand what you're saying in English, but my better language is Spanish. So let's kind of make it work. And it was really cool. He was just, you always felt better after you talked to him.
I have a personal note with that as well. Whenever you would ask him, whenever he would greet, and he was always really shy about doing English. He was never quite sure of himself all the time, and so you sort of had to like coach him or encourage him to do it. We're like, come on. I know Sophie was always really good about getting him to answer in English as well and that type of thing. But whenever he would do it, and whenever he would be done, and he would answer the questions in English, and he would be done, and he would be released, and they would let him go, he'd always have like the biggest smile on his face. He was always so stoked that he did it, and everybody else was smiling too. He was great. Told, by the way, Jonathan dos Santos were great locker room guys. And
I don't believe that Gio was. I'll push back on that one, but if you say so.
I've been told that multiple times by multiple players. So I've always been like, hey, it is what it is. I guess that's what it is. They were always great locker room guys. For Jonathan dos Santos, I think one of his big moments actually came this year whenever he hit the game winner against LAFC, right? LA is ours, baby. That was his thing. The 2019 season sticks out. Whenever I say when was Jonathan dos Santos at his best, it was 2019. It was with Zlatan. It was that year we said, as Jonathan dos Santos plays the LA Galaxy play, for whatever reason, he was comfortable, he was healthy, he was sort of in that zone where he wanted to be, and he could make things happen. So it was a lot of fun.
He's the 30th player for the Galaxy to play in over 100 regular season games. That when I read that, I mean, I think of Jonathan the last 2 seasons, injured, international duty, wasn't really available all that much. Definitely wasn't a 90-minute player. The 103 games really jumps out at me. That's quite an accomplishment. One of 30 players in Galaxy history to play over 100 regular season games. He was the captain, so obviously his teammates liked and appreciated him. He was a leader, a guy that could, we knew his English. He didn't want to talk to us in English, but he talked to his teammates in English. He was a guy who could speak to players, from Pavone to Daniel Steres, and comfortable in both languages with his teammates. And like I said, I never remember talking to him under any circumstances where I didn't feel better when I was done.
Yeah, he was one of those cool dudes. Here's the thing though, at 31 years old, he should not be done with the LA Galaxy. Realistically speaking, if he was playing up to the place that we sort of would have had expected him at 31 years old, he still has 2 or 3 years left of very competitive soccer. That being said, the injuries let him down. It wasn't the fact that he's 31, it's the fact that his body feels like it's 50 at sometimes.
And even when he got on the field, we saw that he would play 55, 60 minutes and look pretty good. And then all of a sudden he's starting to limp a little bit. It wasn't that he wasn't fit. I think it's just, the leg problems he had. It was a groin. I think it was a hamstring at one point. Those things, a lot of times, don't heal 100%. You're never back to where you want to be. And the Galaxy, there were 2 things that Jonathan dos Santos had that the Galaxy really wanted: a $2 million salary and a DP spot. And Greg Vanney really wants that DP spot. Chris Klein told me that they've begun the process. They have some ideas. They haven't, according to him, they haven't really settled on which guy they want, but they're hitting the ground running. They know where they want to go. And Chris Klein, by the way, last year, Greg Vanney brought in 16 new players. Chris Klein said this is appears to be the easiest offseason he's ever had with the Galaxy. He said they got the DP spot, maybe 1 or 2 other positions they're looking at. They feel like the team is set.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, we're going to go over the releases happen, but I want to talk about Jonathan. Looking at a replacement, the big deal here is obviously we have 12 months, a little less than that, until World Cup, Kevin. So anybody you're going to get to move is going to come during a World Cup year, and if they are no longer in the national team picture, that's fine. They can move and do the whole thing. If you're getting anybody who's in their national team picture, American, Mexican, Argentine, however you want to do it, there's going to be a consideration about this World Cup. This World Cup is going to affect things. Now, I think it affects things less because it's 12 months away and not just 6 months away.
Well, here's another thing, though. You're thinking maybe you'll explain this to me in a minute. Maybe I got this wrong. In a typical World Cup year, you're absolutely right, because they would have played, it would be in the summer at the end of the season.
Right.
This time, if you're on a European team, you're going to play 10 or 12 games, and then you're going to break. And you're not maybe in midseason fitness now. If you come to MLS, you're going to have played a full season. You're going to be fully, maybe a little tired, but you're going to be fully fit. And if your team doesn't make the playoffs, you're going to be fully fit. You're going to have a couple of weeks off, go into training camp. If there's any season when maybe a tweener player like, Gareth Bale or someone like that's not going to come to MLS right now. But if you're a tweener player trying to make your national team, MLS might be a good place to come for you because you are going to be fit going into that World Cup roster selection. This year might be a little bit different for MLS.
Yeah, it's good. I honestly, I don't know how to judge it because it's different, right? It's because there's a full year. Because if you're somebody who's like, and obviously the level of Major League Soccer has risen again, just the overall appearance of the league has risen. So if you're somebody who maybe, if you're not, obviously not like a French national team, right? If you're playing on the French national team, you're probably playing in MLS, probably isn't going to get you on the French national team. But if you're playing for one of more of these B-side teams, does playing in MLS hurt your chances or help your chances? We've seen in CONCACAF specifically that playing in MLS has raised the status of a lot of CONCACAF players, and they go back and play for their Jamaicas and they play for their, Costa Ricas and these other teams. And that has really helped CONCACAF be a lot more competitive overall. MLS has, right? So, again, it's just sort of
Raul Ruiz, for example.
Yeah.
He's going to be on that Peruvian team because he's playing so well in MLS. You got, Arango with LAFC all of a sudden winds up being on his national team because he's playing in Colombia because he's playing so well here.
So, I mean, it's this mix. And so I think that, yes, it will have an effect. What effect? I don't know. It would be interesting to sort of look at. Here's the other thing is that what do the Galaxy need? And in my mind, they need another person who's going to bang in goals because Chicharito can't be the only guy scoring goals. And you need somebody like, first of all, you're expecting Cabral to develop. And I know lots of people are like, throw him out. Well, he's coming back. We already told you that. He's coming back next year. He's going to play. And so what do you need to see from Kevin Cabral? You need to see an 8+ tenure. You need to see him approaching 15 to 20 goals, not goals scored by him, but assists plus goals. 15 in that area to start affecting things. And then you need somebody who's also going to be scoring goals on top of this. So I think the Galaxy have been missing a central attacking midfielder, a cam, for a long time. In fact, I don't remember when they've had one. It's been a very long time since they've had sort of that central attacking midfielder. This feels like the time when you can go. Now, the Galaxy's history tells us that Chicharito being paid $6 million a year is going to be the number one DP in terms of the most money that they're spending on him and that type of thing, and that we're going to see a subcategory of DP that's somewhere in the $2 to $3 million range. History would sort of tell us that we probably don't get you don't get a $7 or $8 million guy, but there's nothing keeping the LA Galaxy from doing that, Kevin. And when you realize that Chicharito's coming into his last year of his contract is this year, this 2022 season, upcoming, last season, right? What do you plan for the future with somebody with a bigger splash? I mean, there's some questions there.
Well, and I know that you have the salary figures. There's two players I think that are really important that the Galaxy should really try to bring back that are out of contract right now. Victor Vasquez, they didn't pick up the option on his. He made a lot of money last year, over $450,000. Sasha Kljestan, rather, he was at 245 or something like that. I think they need to bring him back for his locker room leadership, if nothing else. Remember, Jonathan dos Santos, the locker room leader, is the captain. He's gone. You need leadership in that locker room. Vasquez and Kljestan are worth bringing back for that, if for no other reason. But the rest of the roster, they didn't discard that much money. I think you said it was about $4 million they got rid of.
Yeah, and $2 million and $2 million of that is from Jonathan dos Santos. Yeah,
and we don't know what's going to happen with Sasha and Vasquez. They could easily take up $1 million if they both come back, or close to $1 million. So the Galaxy are going to be a high salary team. They always are. They have the resources. They will be forevermore under Greg Vanney. Greg Vanney spends money like a drunken sailor. That's fine. They're going to be a big money team. So I think when you go out and look, and I don't know that you say $3 million or $4 million, you just say go get a central attacking midfielder. But you're right. That's when they talk about when Chris Klein talks about 1 to 2 positions to fill. That's one of the positions to fill.
It feels like it. Let's go over your LA Galaxy roster decisions. They made those decisions. Well, they announced them. They've probably been made for a while. And by the way, were probably made a lot in conjunction with Dennis Declosa whenever he was here.
I was told Dennis did play a big role in all these decisions.
And that's what I was told as well. So Dennis had a hand in this before it happens. Now, currently the LA Galaxy have 23 players on their roster. Let's give you those guys. You have Chicharito, you have Cabral, Grandsir, Leggett, Raveloson, Gonzalez, Williams, Araujo, Joveljic, Alvarez, Bond, Villafana, Steres, Koulibaly, Perez, Dunbar, Neal, Furcranis, Saldana, Klinsmann, Harvey, Depew, and Aguirre. That's 23 players right now. Their salary roster is $16.2 million.
Which would be, third in the league?
Yeah, which would be third in the league. And by the way, the Galaxy also were carrying 34 players throughout the roster, which is another reasons why they're one of the highest spending teams. They have 34 players. They put some people on loan, but technically the salaries all add up to what they add up on. So the declined options were a little over $1 million. The out of contract players are $2.3 million. Again, that's Jonathan dos Santos for the most part on that. And then you had Nico Hämäläinen, who was sent back on loan. The options exercised. Jonathan Klinsmann, his option was exercised. Depew option was exercised. Steres option was exercised. Aguirre option was exercised. And Saldana option was exercised.
And with Steres, it wasn't so much they were exercised. He earned it. It was their performance clauses, correct? In 2020, he had
a performance. Exactly. And so they didn't have a choice, technically. So when everybody wants to argue why Daniel Steres is still on this roster because they say they exercise his option, they were mandated to exercise his option because of the contract.
Also because he's good. That's why he's back.
That is also, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see if how many people want to argue about that. Options declined. Koreniuk option declined. Augustine Williams option declined. With Orange County, right? Didn't he just win a USL championship?
Who?
Augie Williams wasn't.
I don't know. Was he with Orange County?
He got loaned down to Orange County, if I remember correctly. So, but yeah, he was out, but they declined his option. Remember, he was in the doghouse with Greg Vanney earlier in the year.
He was.
Whenever he got a first team contract, and then Greg said he signed a first team contract and then acted like he didn't have to perform anymore, and that never recovered. And you can see Augustine Williams option declined on that. Danilo Acosta, a guy who never really got to play for the LA Galaxy, his option was declined, and then O'Neal Fisher. Those are the guys who are not coming back on their options declined. Eric Lopez, goalkeeper, still negotiating with the LA Galaxy, but option declined. Victor Vasquez, still negotiating, option declined. And Ethan Zubak, still negotiating, option decline on those. And then you talked about the out-of-contract players. Sasha Kljestan, still negotiating. Justin Von Steeg will not return out of contract, and Jonathan dos Santos will not return out of contract. And end of loan, Nico Hämäläinen. The real interesting thing about the QPR thing was we have no idea what the terms of that loan were. And by the way, they were right that Augie went to SD Loyal. You guys are correct. That was where.
I just looked that up. Yeah, he's with Landon, fighting Landon.
With Landon. Yeah, that was the other one. Anyway, yeah, they got it. The chat room always keeps me straight. That's fine. Nico Hämäläinen is going back to Queen's Park Rangers. The loan terms of that were secret. We don't know if the Galaxy had an option to buy, whether or not they were just sort of mandated to return him at the end of the year. Maybe they had an option to extend the loan. We know none of that because QPR was like, nope, don't tell anybody. That's not going to happen. So yeah, that's sort of where we sit with this roster. But Kevin, you look at this, and I looked at this, and you and I went over this on Saturday or Sunday. We went over on Sunday because you gave me a call. And we talked about this. There's no surprises, right? Besides Victor Vasquez, maybe a slight surprise just in terms of not picking up the option, but declining the option and negotiating a different contract. I imagine.
Right. I think they want to try to sign him for less money.
Yeah, well, I also think that they want to sign him, and I think Greg Vanney probably told him this. This is what I would do with Victor is, hey, Victor, we want you back. For sure, we want you back, but I don't know how much I can pay you yet. I need to see how things shake out. So if you're willing, we can work something out. It's going to be probably between this range and this range, and I'll be 100% honest with you because you and I go way back. Like, I'll let you look at the books if you want, but we will pay you what we can in there, and it's going to be between these two numbers, but I might need $100,000 somewhere to do so. Is that something you're even interested in? Right. And I don't know if Victor Vasquez, they say he's still negotiating. Now, sometimes they say still negotiating and those things never get off the ground. Right. Like, it's like, no, I'm not coming back.
It's like hopeful. The team hopes we're still negotiating.
Right.
I think Eric Lopez probably comes back. I think they need a third string goalkeeper. He played a lot. Didn't he play a lot of Galaxy too?
I believe so. Yes.
He's a guy they might want to bring back. I really think Sasha Kljestan should be brought back. I know he's old, but he had a great season last year, led the team of performance off the bench, played in 31 games, and he had 5 goals. And 3 of them either put the Galaxy ahead or won the game. I envision him kind of like a Greg Berhalter coming back as maybe a player coach. I know he wants to get into coaching. He'd be perfect for that job. And the Galaxy could kind of groom him, give him a little bit more of a role, and maybe he gets paid a little more than he did last year because he has a split contract. I mean, I don't know how that would work.
I do know how it would work. Did you know that there's a rule that basically says that you can hire guys as player coaches, right? But that not more than 50% of their coaching salary or their coaching salary of their total salary can be from coaching. So it has to be less than half of what they're making in order to do their coaching duties.
So he could bring him back if he made something like, I think he made 247 or something like that, bring him back at 200 for his playing salary and then give him 75 for his coaching. He gets a raise, and he comes back, and the Galaxy get the benefit of that without it being a big salary hit.
Correct. Yeah, that is something that could happen. Just technically speaking, yes. That is.
But we have no idea what we're talking about. I don't know if Sasha wants to do that. He does want to be a coach. I know that. He's got his coaching license.
Yes, and we know Victor Vasquez was sort of in that same position too. We know that Vasquez also wants to be a coach and sort of wants to do this stuff. So again, that is your options. This is the roster that's going forward. So you have 23 guys. There are 30 players on a roster. The big one in here, and I think again, unless you've been living under a rock, Kevin, Giancarlo Gonzalez is on this roster and still has one more year left on his deal. Now, it's expected that he will be loaned out again and that his salary would be separated from the cap again, because that's what happened this year. So just keep an eye on that and sort of how it goes. This is another interesting thing to look at here, Kevin, is currently, as it's constituted, the LA Galaxy have 8 international slots being used on the first team roster, right? So they get 8. So they're going to have to move people like they did with Carlos Harvey, like they did with Giancarlo Gonzalez. They have to move people in order to get the international slots they want. We would imagine
that they lost Jonah. Even
though they lost Jonah. Because they had technically, I think there were 10 total. Let's see, 1, 2. I have 9 for sure that I'm looking at. No, 10. Yeah, there was 2. So you had Victor Vasquez as international and Jonathan dos Santos as an international, right? And so there were 10 total, but they loaned out Giancarlo Gonzalez and they loaned out Carlos Harvey, which gave them 8 for the compliant roster. But as it stands right now, with Gonzalez and with Harvey currently on the roster, the 23-man roster they have 8 international slots set up there. So
how do you address that? I mean, you would look at somebody like maybe Cabral and say, you've got a 5-year contract, go get a green card.
Yes. The fact that the LA Galaxy have not been more aggressive about getting green cards is just, it's malpractice. It's absolutely something. And you can see other teams using that. And the Galaxy used to use that, Kevin, right? Robbie Keane got a green card. All right. Robbie Keane was a domestic player towards the end of his time with the LA Galaxy, and right through the middle of it, they knew it was important to be able to do that and be able to use international slots other places. It is absolutely one of the most important things the LA Galaxy could do, is try to find some of these internationals who are going to be here for a while, who want to do this, is get a green card. And I know it's more difficult. I know it's the rules have changed a lot in recent time, but we've seen other teams do this over the course of these COVID years and in between all this stuff. So the chance for the LA Galaxy to do this is there, and they need to take advantage of it, or they're wasting an advantage for this.
So looking at this roster and where they are, Chris Klein says we're looking at maybe 2 positions in a DP. That DP could take one of those positions, obviously. What are the 2 positions? You've already named one, central attacking midfielder. Where else do you think? I mean, I think the back line, yes, it could have used help, yes, but the back line's okay. The midfield needs a central attacker. Is your other position a forward? I mean, you've got Grancier, you've got Joveljic, you've got Chicharito, you've got Cabral. Do we need another forward?
No, I mean, so I think it's on defense though, because it's Villafana as your starting left back currently as this roster sits, right? So you're going to need backup there. You need a backup on the right back. O'Neal Fisher, his option was declined. So you don't have a backup at right back. You don't have a backup at left back. Villafana is not a 34-game starter, and you can't expect him to be, although he was for a while, and then he got injured. You saw what happened. Nico Hamalainen came in, and he was there. Fisher filled in over there. You need 1 or 2 more outside backs, whether that's left back and right back, which I think you need at least that, and then you probably need a third. That's going to be a mid-level sort of dollar amount on that. It's not going to be cheap. You can't just get anybody, but you also have to start planning for Julian Araujo eventually leaving as well. So do you find a younger person, a guy who's going to be more MLS bound and sort of set in MLS, that you're going to start working towards that right back role? Are you going to promote somebody from the academy? Those are the things they have to figure out. But as I look at this with 23 roster players, and I expect, probably 2 of those or 3 of those go on loan. So you figure 20 players, the Galaxy probably bring in 10 players. Which is a lot more than people think it is, but also the impactful roles that are happening, most of that is going to be in depth category. It's not going to be in starter outside of the designated player. So outside back for me is probably where you're going to see some investment, maybe 3 or 4 players in that outside back role.
And 2 of the players the Galaxy declined options on are national team outside backs. O'Neal Fisher with Jamaica and Acosta with Honduras, right?
Yes, absolutely. So, But to be honest with you, neither of those probably really fit into what the LA Galaxy were trying to do. Fisher struggled. Danilo Acosta was injured the whole time. I'm not really sure that's even fair for him. Hamalainen was, if you used him for a specific reason, he was good, but you're going to have to go out and find somebody to sort of replace him because you need that starter / backup to Villafana. So you need some coverage on those outside backs. That's the other position where I'm thinking the LA Galaxy are thin. And I haven't done the roster breakdown yet and sort of gone in the depth chart of the 23, but that's next. Tomorrow's Tuesday. I can always do that on Tuesday. Let's get on to a little bit more stuff. I just want to touch on the home openers for the LA Galaxy, and it was announced. I know all of you already know this, but we didn't get to talk about it on the podcast. We knew that the LA Galaxy were going to head to Charlotte to open up Bank of America Stadium on March 5th, but we didn't know what the LA Galaxy's first game would be, and we're now set with that. Sunday, February 27th, the LA Galaxy will host New York City FC at Dignity Health Sports Park.
They could be the MLS champion. They're still alive. They could be the reigning MLS champion then. And again, second year in a row, Galaxy open with 2 Eastern Conference teams.
Yeah, and not only that, but they short rest them already on the first week because they play on Saturday. They play on a Sunday to start the season, and then they play on a Saturday all the way across the country. So that's nice. Good job, MLS, already. Doing a little of that. There's 6 days in there. It's a normal week, but at the same time, it's always like,
It's a lot. I mean, that's a travel day. You're not going to probably train that day, so you lose a day and a travel day back.
Yep. It's something. It's not nothing. It's something, but it's early in the season too, so you hopefully everybody's not tired from the first game after that goes in. Expansion draft news as well. Charlotte FC will join the league in 2022. That'll be the 28th team. Remember, Nashville is going to come over to the Western Conference. We talked about that. The expansion draft is set for December 14th, where they will pick 5 players. But Kevin, I can guarantee one thing: not one of those 5 players is going to be from the LA Galaxy. Charlotte is coming in the same expansion window as Austin did. So technically, 2 of those teams came in the same exact window. And whenever that happens, the teams that had players chosen from them in the previous expansion draft are exempt. The LA Galaxy had Joe Corona picked from, was it Houston? No, it was from Austin. And then
he got traded.
And then, no, he didn't get traded. It was like a waivers deal where he was picked up on waiver. It was one of those re-entry draft things that I guess Austin wasn't like privy to.
That's why you need Dennis to stick around and figure all this stuff out.
Oh, man.
This is wacky. I'm sorry. You and I do this for a living, and I have no idea what stage 2 reentry draft is all about. It sounds like something that happens with a rocket, coming back into the atmosphere.
Yeah, I get it. I know what you mean. I'm sort of looking at some of the dates here. November 30th, the club deadline exercise option is coming up. That's for the clubs not competing, which is why the LA Galaxy announced theirs today on the 29th. There'll be a lot of people announcing tomorrow on the 30th. Club deadline exercise options between December 1st and December 12th. Half-day trade window opens up on December 12th. That's 9 a.m. Eastern to 1 p.m. Eastern. Half-day trade window closes at 1 p.m. Eastern. 2021 expansion draft on December 14th. Then you have end-of-year waivers on December 15th. Free agency opens 1 p.m. on December 15th. December 7th is reentry stage 1. December 23rd, reentry stage 2. The LA Galaxy are exactly 90 days from right now, Kevin. 90 days from opening up against New York City FC. Just to give everybody an idea of how quickly this is going to wrap up.
That half-day trade window, the window only goes half up, or is that like rally schedule? There's no lunch, and you just go to homeroom and go to your class. I mean, how does what does that even mean? Come on, no other league in the world does this goofy stuff.
You're only allowed to trade for half the player. So if they're a 2-footed player, you get to pick which foot you want, the right foot or the left foot. So that's how.
I just think MLS, they've created all these rules because they've painted themselves in the corner with salary rules or whatever it is. But if we can't figure it out, the fans can't figure it out, and that takes away a lot of the fun. You look at the Dodgers right now; they're imploding. All their players are leaving. Everybody understands how free agency works, how the Rule 5 draft works, how baseball works, and you can have these discussions. Should the Dodgers have kept Max Scherzer? What should they have done with Corey Seager? We can't have that discussion because we don't know where the Galaxy.
I was going to say,
how the rules work.
Don't lump me into your I don't know how things work. I know how things work.
I'm saying the salary. I was saying the salary. Most people don't even know the salary. Are they under the cap? Are they over the cap? Can they bring this guy in? And then when Gio came in, remember in 2015, they invented a whole other rule. This is just
Yeah, but I will say this, all right? The reason that baseball is because it's been around for 100 and something years, right?
And I was there at the start.
You were there for the first pitch, yes.
Yeah.
It was underhand. And so, that's one of the reasons that it. And they have a very sort of interesting free agency structure there in baseball. Like, it's something that makes sense. The whole reason that there were all these reentry drafts and the waiver drafts and all these things is because they were trying not to allow free agency in, and now free agency has sort of been allowed, and it keeps getting whittled down to sort of how it goes. I imagine eventually some of this is the way MLS keeps the single entity, which, by the way, if anybody challenged it right now would totally get blown out of the water. This is how MLS keeps the single entity idea and keeps competition between the teams, but allows player movement. That's all these are: reentry drafts, waiver drafts, or anything like that. That's it.
My point is if we just say, hey, the Galaxy need an outside back, we should be able to sit here and talk about, well, New England has a guy out of contract, maybe they could get him, and then we could talk about, but we can't. Why? Because, well, he may be in the reentry draft, or he may be in phase 1 of the reentry draft, or he may be in the half-day trade window. We don't know where any of these guys are and what their status is, so we can't have these conversations. That's
the big thing, is just the complete transparency of contracts. Just everything should be listed. Everything should be able to look up. You should be able to type in a player's name. It should show their contract, show their salary, whether they have performance metrics, what the deal is, like, what their rider, they have to have green M&Ms in their locker room, in their locker before every game, that type of thing. It's one of those things that you have to sort of look at and do. I agree, it's complicated. I don't mind it being complicated, of course, though, Kevin, because that's how I make my money here on the show, is I explain these things. So
yeah, a lot of money. But I'm just talking about more for the fans. I mean, you'd like to be able to have those conversations. Hey, what can we get right back? I don't know.
I'll tell you this. You don't have to worry a lot about intra-league trades just because they don't happen as much, right? It's one of those things where you're like, oh, the whole deal. I mean, Villafana came from the Portland Timbers. That was like something you're like, oh my God, it happened between teams? That's crazy.
Yeah.
I just wanted to go quickly and tell everybody, again, the MLS Cup playoffs still coming on. It's still interesting to watch. I implore you to watch, especially because quite honestly, I'm team chaos on this. I really want to see RSL beat Portland now, so that way you can say that handball in the box basically paved their way to an MLS Cup. Super interesting.
That could be the Galaxy. That was their spot.
People, by the way, wanted to argue about that, right? Somebody said, well, during the season, in fact, Eric, I was talking to him, he said, I think that they beat Sporting Kansas City during the season, they beat Seattle during the season, and the Galaxy didn't do that. I said, yeah, Eric, which means they lost to more bad teams than the Galaxy did, because the Galaxy didn't beat those teams. They ended on the same number of points. The bottom line is, if you get into the playoffs in Major League Soccer, you have a chance at winning. You need to catch lightning in a bottle. You need to find a difference maker. But look, number 1 seed Colorado is out. Number 3 seed Sporting Kansas City is out. Number 2 seed Seattle is out. So, there's a path to a championship for every team that makes the playoffs. RSL going up against Portland. And then, of course, we're going to find out New York City, New England, all those fun things coming up here tomorrow. And then you'll see sort of what your conference finals look like. Portland, RSL, whether it's probably New England. I'm guessing it's going to be New England versus Philadelphia for that Eastern Conference one. So there you go. That's how it is. By the way, David pointed out in the chat room a very, very good point. RSL are so hateable, though, but so are Portland, so he's just going to root for the ball.
So there's only one team in those 4 that cannot host
RSL.
Yes, that's correct.
No.
Portland can host if New York City beats New England.
Yeah. I mean, it's super, super interesting playoffs. The games have been fun. They've been entertaining. They've been fun to watch. So go watch them. Enjoy that part. And like I said, 90 days until the LA Galaxy kick off against New York City FC, which blows my mind, Kevin. That means that we're not that far away. What are we, 45 days or something like that until the teams are going to report, like January 12th?
Pitchers and catchers report in a couple of weeks. By the way, you mentioned earlier that quality of play in MLS is getting better, and then you talked about Charlotte coming in. Don't you think that the more MLS continues to expand, 28 teams, then they're going to go to 30? That's the plan now. St. Louis coming in soon. And don't you think it dilutes from the talent pool? I know they say, it's a world game, but the salaries don't change. And there are a number of American players coming in the game now. If you have a 20-team league, 20 by say 30 players, you get 600 players. Now you increase that by 10, you have another 300 players. Those 300 players weren't in the league when you had 20 teams. By definition, it would seem to me that the talent pool is getting diluted. I don't know how many players you bring in from South America that are cheap.
You only get 8. You only get 8 more international slots per expansion team, right? Every team gets 8, so you only get 8 more. So every time a new team comes in, you get 8 more international slots. There's a limit to that, right? And if you have a 30-man roster, then the majority of your players have to be domestic. right? That's sort of how it goes. And you're right. I mean, players have told me this straight out. They said, and if you look at what is happening with the playoffs, you look at the quality of sort of the teams this year. Remember, we were all convinced that there were only a couple good teams in the Western Conference. Well, they're all sitting on the sideline right now. Seattle, Colorado, and what was the other? Sporting Kansas City. They're all out. So tell me again, who the good teams are in the Western Conference? I'd love for somebody to explain it.
Well, I was having a conversation on a plane with a guy who said he lived in LA and used to go to MLS games or follow the teams, and he moved to Atlanta and was really excited about Atlanta United. And he goes, you know what? I just can't watch MLS right now. The talent has been so diluted that it's just not, in his mind, not watchable. I don't know if I'd go to that extreme, but I do think that the more they continue to expand, MLS chasing those expansion fees, that's what's funding everything. $325 million for Charlotte to enter the league, which is basically 4 times what the TV contract paid the team per year, to give you an idea.
Yep.
They're chasing that expansion money, and it's diluting. They're almost killing the product. As they take that expansion money, they dilute the product.
The only thing is that that's not a constant, right? That doesn't just sit still. And the Academy of Systems and we've been seeing in the chat room too. The Academy systems are developing new players. You are creating better talent. So that's not a forever. But eventually MLS has to stop expanding, and then you have to backfill with these players that you are creating and eventually selling and doing the things that you need to do. So
the Academy systems. I mean, you look at what Dallas's Academy system did, and then Vancouver with Alphonso Davies, and Tim Weah was in an academy system. I think Gio Reyna was in an academy system. A lot of these players, they didn't stay long, but they were discovered by MLS.
Those guys are going to come back, though. Eventually they come back, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. Eventually these guys come back. They may be 32, 33, but they're coming back, right? And so like these things have a way of balancing themselves out and improving. And
maybe the Galaxy need to go get DeAndre Yedlin for the outside back.
I would love to be able to be sitting on a plane having a conversation about MLS and the diluted talent pool. That feels like you sat next to the only other MLS fan on the plane. Like that feels like. Were you talking to yourself?
You want to know how it really happened?
Yes.
I was getting on the plane, and I carry a little book bag, where magazines and stuff, and it was it had the Manchester City logo on it, of course. So it was the flight attendant, and he started chatting me up, and he said he was from Spain. He grew up in, I think, Madrid. Had his favorite Spanish team. I forget which one it was. And then told me he lived in the States and really wanted to follow soccer. Lived in LA. He was intrigued by LAFC. Didn't go to a Galaxy game. Then he moved to Atlanta and really wanted to get in that team. And he said, "But I watched games on TV and I just can't get it." Now, his idea of soccer is La Liga, so I understand that.
Eurosnob. I knew it was going to come down to a Eurosnob. I felt it with that answer, which is like I see. Like whenever I tell you, I can see the talent being diluted.
I don't know if the Eurosnob thing is fair, because if I moved to Korea, I might look at Korean baseball and say, yeah, but these guys couldn't beat the Yankees. I don't know if I'm a snob or if I'm just recognizing the Korean League is not the same as the American League East.
I can go watch a boys U12 game and find something interesting in it to watch soccer. If you like soccer, I'll usually follow. The people who are like, I just can't watch it, are the ones who are like, I'll watch the Scottish Premier League on a Saturday morning at 3:30 a.m. So no, I don't buy it. I'm calling. And by the way, it feels like you planted that person. That's really what it feels like. I feel like this is a plant. Like you said, hey, this will be a good idea, and you wrote it down in your book like you were having two sides of a conversation. That's what I think. So
he's a composite of many people I met.
Yeah, exactly. You wrote a character. That's what happened. By the way, I cannot wait until we get further into the holiday season, only because I have a story about the time that I actually saw Santa Claus. And I would like to share it with everybody. Yes, I'm not going to share it now. I don't want to do it now because we're not there yet. We're over Thanksgiving, but we're not quite into Christmas. And I want everybody to be fully committed to the holiday season as we get closer. And my wintry mixed background be fully embraced by everybody around. So we will eventually get to that. By the way, I did tell a story about my 9-pound turkey that my mother-in-law had for 14 people one of the first Thanksgivings I ever spent with her.
That's less than a pound a person.
Yeah, it's not a good recipe for. By the way, there were leftovers. I told this whole story. I'll tell you another time. But I was afraid that I was going to get in trouble somehow, some way that I was going to get in trouble. So far, I have not gotten in trouble. So I would just like to say that I've skated by. So far, nobody's told my mother-in-law that I was making fun of her 9-pound turkey.
So you know Santa. You've met Santa.
I didn't meet him face to face, but I did run across him. Yes. Yes.
Tell Santa, look at me. Tell Santa I need a treadmill for Christmas.
Yeah, you do need a treadmill for Christmas. I agree. I need a rowing machine. I'm not here to judge Kevin on any of that stuff. All right. I think that's it. Let's close it down. A lot of stuff came through from the LA Galaxy. We are planning on having a show on Thursday. Don't know what we're going to talk about because we just talked about everything. I doubt there's going to be another huge drop of information, but we are still waiting for a press conference, a media call with Greg Vanney, with Chris Klein, that is supposed to be happening still in the next couple of weeks. So we're waiting for that, and hopefully we'll be able to ask some questions and find some information out about that. So that's sort of next on one of the things. We'll see if we can do that. But yeah.
By the way, from Mexico, another thing I did since I've been here on Saturday, I went to see Club America in the Liga MX playoffs. Played Pumas. They lost to Pumas. 56,000 in Azteca. It was electric. It was amazing atmosphere.
That sounds
really
cool. Are you? I see. I was going to ask if you're eating any good food, and then I remembered you're a vegetarian, and it hurts my heart.
We had Mexican food is awesome for vegetarians.
Okay.
We went to a place today after we left the Mexican Federation's training center, which again, amazing. The U.S. should have something like that. And by the way, the U.S. is talking about that, and it may not be Dignity Health Sports Park, which forever and a day was where they wanted to be, and they built out all those locker rooms and all those fields. Then they talked about Kansas City, too cold. The big problem now is a lot of the top players are in Europe, and trying to come to California or even Kansas City is too far. If the U.S. constructs a training base where they have the U15s and U16s and U17s and a sand pitch like they do here,
right,
it's going to be in Florida. So just know that they're going to have to go to Florida because it's the closest to the East Coast, closest rather to Europe. But we did go to a Mexican place today. It was awesome. There was a bull ring in the parking lot, which
that's usually the sign of a good restaurant, really.
Yeah, don't get the meat. It's great for a vegetarian. There were no bulls in the ring, nor people, but it was there. There were mariachis. That was amazing, and we ate so much food. I don't think I'll eat again. I need a treadmill, but I don't think I'll eat again for 6 days or so.
All right. Well, that's good. All right. We're glad to have you. All right. Anything else? You good? I can shut it down?
Yes, Julian Araujo and Efrain Alvarez are here, but I haven't seen them yet.
Well, great. Good job. Way to bookend that podcast an hour and 15 minutes ago. All right. If you're looking for Mr. Kevin Baxter on Twitter, it's at KBaxter11. Head on over to latimes.com. That's where you can find him. All of his writing. He did a good article on Carly Lloyd. I haven't read it yet, and he already yelled at me for not reading it, but I am going to read it. Read about Carly Lloyd, latimes.com. Kevin's got a lot of good stuff headed your way. All right. If you're looking for me on Twitter, it's at Guesman, JGUESMAN, and of course at Galaxy Podcast, cornerthegalaxy.com, where you can find all of our writing, our podcast, all that fun stuff. We're back from Thanksgiving break, a couple pounds heavier, but feeling light on our feet as it goes. We'll have a show on Thursday for you. Don't know who my co-host is, but we'll announce it. We'll get you rolling. All right. For Mr. Kevin the Panda Baxter, I'm Josh Pato Guesman. You've been listening. You've been watching to Corner of the Galaxy from the box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. Have a great one, everybody.
You've been listening to the Corner of the Galaxy podcast on cornerofthegalaxy.com. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast. And be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. Fans, we thank you for listening, and we ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm Michael Araujo, and on behalf of the entire Corner of the Galaxy crew, goodbye, everybody.